Good afternoon. Study session, Mayor and City Council meeting 2 p.m. Monday, September 23rd, 2024, City Hall Complex Council Chambers. Call this meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Bermudez, would do us the honor. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we move to item 3, presentations. Number 1, update zoning and development standards. Go ahead, Hector, and introduce our guests.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. As you know, the Development Standards Code, the zoning, hasn't been updated in many, many years. So this is our opportunity to make the changes after 40 years of many amendments. So today we're going to discuss the latest updates. As you may know also, this update started 2 years ago. We didn't start from scratch. We just took it over, and now we're trying to complete the review and potential changes to the old zoning code and development standards. Before I continue, I'm going to introduce Jessica Sarkisian. She is our consultant from Outfront Planning and Entitlements. She has been helping us in the last few months, taking over the previous revisions, and now she's here to present the code. But before I do that, I'm gonna just give you a couple. You have a copy of the PowerPoint that she's gonna present, and also you have 2 copies. The thicker copy, the zoning code. This is the one we use in planning and zoning, and the other copy, the smaller in thickness, that's the technical document, the Development Standards Code. So combined with these 2 documents, we actually do the plan review, planning and zoning, and building and engineering services as well. So Jessica is going to concentrate first on the zoning update code, the bigger book. Jessica? Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Hector. Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessica Sarkisian with Upfront Planning. I met a few of you at the League of Cities. It's good to see you again. As Hector mentioned, this is the update. I'm going to go through a brief history of the code, why we're doing it, so you can see comparables, and then we'll kind of go through each section. We're not going to go through piece by piece of the change because it's so monumentous, you know. And then don't let it scare you. The only reason the other one's thicker is one is double-sided and one is not. So they're basically about the same. So the code history is that it was originally, this current one was really originally adopted in 1999. It governs the land use, construction, and development standards within the city. It's been augmented over the years to address the city's unique needs as it's grown, and continually added with no repeals or reorganization, which has caused some confusion. When you keep adding and not removing things, you get a lot of conflicts and contrasting issues that don't match. So in 2019, as Hector mentioned, the City of Nogales began the process to amend the zoning code section. And then in 2024, it was restarted without including the entire development services code update for correcting the organization and duplications. So here, these are the biggest things we found issues with. Obviously, there's little nuances within it, but also the duplicate sections with different info, parking, signs, processes. There were multiple sections within development code and zoning code. And so a lot of, when we spoke to constituents, they were concerned, which one do we use? And since they were confused, a lot of people just didn't use them. The general plan is currently in there. That should not be in a development code. That is a policy document, so that is being removed completely. And so it's not being deleted. It's still alive in its own format, but it is not a code. It is a policy. Difficult to navigate. The sections were missing. Some of them were, we mentioned things in the table of contents, but they weren't really there. And again, with the duplicate sections, challenging to understand what code do I use, and then contradictory, different standards in the same code. So we received some comments. We did a work session on August 8th with some planning commission members and members of the public. We've heard comments from Christian Solero, Architectural Resource Team, David Fernandez, Mariposa Properties, Alex Corey, Engineering Group, Noah Garcia. And also we met separately with different Nogales departments in fire, the city engineer, community services director, and of course, community development director. So we've seen quite a different comments of work wish lists, things that they have conflicts with, and that we're continuing to go through it and find more items as we have reorganized. So some of the biggest issues we had were there was no spaces for parking, not clear in the code where it goes. The need for accessory dwelling units, which is based on the state statute, the new state law. Housing flexibility and opportunity were restricted. It wasn't clear on where things would go. Lack of coordination between utility permits. A lot of times there were being construction permits before utility permits and just organization of those things. Roadway standards were not present. Conflicting sections of the code, as we mentioned before, so people weren't enforcing anything. Water issues, issuing water connection permits before other kind of permits that were required. Code compliance, who enforces the penalties, which department, how do they enforce it? The fees needed updated. They were mentioned in the codes, or are mentioned in the code many, many times. And so we're updating how that's addressed because you want the fees to be able to be updated more fluidly as costs change. You don't want it to be in the code where you have to go through council every time for an amendment. And then issues with gas transferring trucks, which was currently not in the code. And there's some other uses that have come up that were not in the code. So there were issues with concern about fire and safety on the gas transferring trucks across the border. So the goal update was to streamline the development process, increasing efficiency, saving costs, saving staff time, consistent and clear information where they were supposed to go. And for property owners and developers, reorganize the table of contents, moving things, you'll see in other slides, moving things from things that were in development services code that should be in zoning and vice versa. Improving the numbering and section structures to easier navigate and locate items. Clear guidelines to increase compliance to follow the code. And it also makes this easier for the staff to update. I've been talking to Juan and Hector a lot, and there's still issues. I mean, perfection is the killer of good, so you're never going to get a perfect code. There's always room for improvements. And so by the way it's been reorganized in the amendment section, we now have made it easier for staff to go in and do these amendments very quickly instead of waiting for 20, 30 years to do so. Updated definitions in both sections to be clear and remove duplicates that were conflicting between the sections. Made housing affordability and diversity easier to attain with the reorganization from the 2019, the one that we recently had started, and then clear direction for process and requirements. So here's a quick side-by-side comparison to show you the difference of the table of contents. Keep in mind the table, everything was written on the typewriter previously, so it's a lot different. So here was the original code, and it's going to be dramatic here. The code. This is just table of contents. And it keeps going and going. And yeah, okay, so of course, previous. And so here's what we did. So we had all these different sections when we figured it out. The green stayed, the red were removed, the orange were like reorganized or things. So this all that stuff became this new code ordinate. This is all the whole entire table of contents for the zoning code, and you can see Article 3, the Development Standards Code. So you can see it's more standardized, easier to find and locate. There's tabs, there's subsections, everything kind of has a clear place. So new in the code, this is the formatting, numbering section, organize the flow, added tables, more visuals and images for better understanding. A lot of the the table, it didn't have tables. It was however you would write a table on a typewriter, which the alignments were commonly off. There was no examples. There was a couple examples of visuals, but they were harder to read. So precise and made the language more concise. There were things that talked about, you would call them site visibility triangles. I think we consolidated that in best practices to like 2 paragraphs. Previously, it was a page and a half, where you get so convoluted, you just can't understand what you just read. So making things clearer like that. We define table of contents to determine sections, remove duplicates. So here is the sections. We're going to go into the different chapters and pages you can look through, which are new. You can just see how it's been updated. So if you go into the zoning code, the big book, And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to stop me at any time so I can make comments in the book with you. So I know where, if you have comments or questions, I can update things as well. So this is in the big zoning code. This table is in there actually a couple times, but this just shows what was done before in the previous update you guys have worked on, which was having the former districts and the new districts, so consolidating a little bit. So the new would be R1, and you can see the former district is SFR 1 plus and all SFR 32, SFR 24. Now becomes the R1 district, and so on down the line. You can see neighborhood commercial is still neighborhood commercial, but it also brings in the LC to that district. Commercials are mostly similar, but it just to help you guys organize if people are concerned. I currently have this zoning. What does that mean? And it'll tell you where it goes into. So we have the conversion chart that's in there in the very beginning, and then it's also in the zoning section. And then we also added a reviewing authority, which is on page 63. And it talks about, that actually was a pretty big one to add. So we go through all the definitions and added all kinds of pretty pictures you'll see in there. Took as exactly what we could find that we've used as different examples of signage, parking, what lot setbacks mean, side setbacks. That's always one I've seen throughout all the jurisdictions I've worked in. Everybody wants to well, how would you apply this setback and how would this work? And actually the committee before had some good comments and just making sure that we showed, setbacks that followed curves and were just straight across. So we updated those with some better examples. So if there's things like that or concerns that you feel you want to see more examples of or pictures to better define, please let us know. Or if you think it doesn't explain it enough. And then we go into, as you mentioned on page 63, we added detail to the reviewing authority about boards, commissions, and panels. Yes?
Yep, you mentioned the bigger book referencing the page numbers.
The what?
The bigger book. So they can follow
Oh, the page numbers at the bottom?
the big book.
Yeah, so you guys are all in this, the bigger, thicker zoning code book. And the page numbers are all at the bottom. So it's on page 63 is the reviewing authority. So we added quite a bit in there. There wasn't previously really anything detailing about the Board of Adjustment. They were very small details on there. But in there, we just talked about just how things are made. All the applications, the internal review panel, because the internal review panel had been mentioned in the previous code. And as I was reading it, I had a lot of questions for Hector because I didn't know what that meant. And so just defining what it is so people would know exactly the processes. And then it goes also into, we added the table of, the director or designated staff, internal review, who sees a zoning interpretation? Who sees an ordinance text amendment? Who sees site plan review? And just so you just can figure out what process you're going to go to and who actually gets to review those things. And so that's how we get into, those are the bigger sections that we added items to. And then we get into the zoning regulations. So this is the meat of everything for the zoning, which starts on page 73. And again, you'll re-see that table conversion chart so people can understand what they have. And also, we also reorganized some of the chapters, like planned area developments should be under zoning. It is a zoning category. It doesn't need its own special section aside from it. It is a zoning category and has its own uses and set requirements. So we put that in there with the overlays and flexible development tools. So we revised the zoning categories, and in doing so, we also revised and provided development standards table. So as you can see on here, you have for R1, and we divided them by residential and then commercial and industrial. So people don't have this ginormous chart to look through. It's a little more legible. And so here we have maximum residential density, and then we also have maximum residential density with flexible development options. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's to help out with that flexibility in housing opportunities. It's something new for you guys, and it's been used in other jurisdictions. I've used it at the City of Phoenix, and it works really, really well. So people have more flexibility without having to go through the hearing process, as long as they're giving you guys something in return in terms of more development character or quality or public services or open spaces or things like that. But here we just basically went through and showed all the minimum lot area, site area, lot width, lot depth, front setbacks, all the way down, so that people can clearly see. If they're looking at a site, they can just refer to the table, know their zoning, and say, these are my standards, without even talking to the city staff. This is where I'm starting from. And it'll just help them figure out also if they need to rezone, where they need to be. What are they looking for? And so that should help them also down there. So development standard table, easy reference, and added flexibility to the R3 and multifamily lot standards to allow for more options in housing, because there's been quite a lot different new building types and standards that can occur. So allowing those opportunities to come forward and at least be presented to staff so that staff can review them and talk to the applicant about it. And then here also within the zoning code, we're also going to see the permitted use table. So this also was not, it was previously just a list. This is going to be a clear table of anything that is permitted. Is a P, permitted by right. L is permitted subject to limitations. So they have they can do it by right as long as they follow certain design or setback requirements. And then you have a U for special use permit required, which would be going through a hearing body. So for instance, you have, in residential, you can do a greenhouse in the R1, very low density, or you can do it in neighborhood commercial and commercial, whereas other districts it wouldn't be allowed. And then you have commercial crop, you can do it in low density residential, or you can do it in commercial, light industrial, and high industrial, but you're gonna have to provide some likely setbacks, criteria for dust control or things like that, and lighting. And so that goes all the way down. This is the residential, and then you can see some here examples. There's more residential, and it's split into different categories. So you see there's like a gray band across it in spaces. So anything below there is more industrial. Same thing on the other side, commercial uses, things down there. You can follow it. It's quite a couple pages of things. But for instance, like wireless communication facilities, we put things in there like, okay, well, you'll need a use permit for that. Or freestanding concealed. Some of them are allowed by right with setbacks or shielding in more industrial and commercial areas, but you would need a use permit to put a wireless facility in a residential district. So things like that. And then also there were some other ones we added. We have things about wrecking yards. I'll have to go back, but there's a couple different ones in there we talked about. For instance, here's an example. So we talk about specific use design standards and criteria. So like fuel transfer stations, we added more criteria. Marijuana facilities, home occupations, wireless communications, drive-through facilities. So like with a fuel transfer facility, there must be a permanent sign designated as a fuel transfer facility. You can't just throw them anywhere. Comments we had were they're needing to have a fire hydrant within 50 feet of the site, ground covering, security cameras, certain things like that to make sure that the public safety, health and welfare has been taken into account before you just allow something like that to be on site. Drive-throughs have certain setback requirements from residential, or speaker boxes have certain setback requirements so that you don't have it right adjacent to someone's back wall. And so those kinds of things were put in there for any use that had a U or an L should have a coordinating criteria list in the back. Some of them are very minor, and then some of them, depending on the intensity, can be a little more rigorous. And then also, we reorganized overlay districts. The airport airspace, mixed use historic district and landmarks, and downtown districts. We're making it clearer. The downtown overlay was left in and is going to remain as reference for right now. We're going to go into it a little bit more intense. Hector's working on that, but it's just not going to be ready for then. But there is a space in there, and it specifically calls out the historic. Let's see if I can find what page it's on. So the overlay district starts on page 109. And then I did, just so you know, I did revise the airport airspace overlay. It was very difficult. So I took best practices from similar airports, small airports, larger airports throughout the state, and came up with an area that we have like AOI 1, area of influence, landing and approach areas, protection zones, just so it's a little clearer of what people can do in those air flight zones, what's permitted. You can't have residential in the runway area, but they're encouraging industrial or commercial and things like that. So the mixed use overlay, go into there a little bit more about what it encourages, development standards for mixed use overlays, setbacks, maximum height and density and parking. Talk a little bit about parking there. And then let's see, the downtown, yeah. So like the downtown area, we talk about it, we put the minimum we could tell what you want is providing flexibility and encouraging housing, retail and employment in the downtown area, and encouraging mixed use, reuse of historical areas and buildings, and bringing in more housing opportunities to live in the downtown. And the downtown overlay is only appropriate within the downtown area as determined by the planning director or designee, and buildings with the downtown area are encouraged to have higher residential densities and encouraged as mixed use. So, and then from there, it's just reserved because we're just expand more details about permitted uses, processes, parking. That'll be added in after the fact. So yeah, there's the historic district overlay, still the H-O district, and talks about regulations with underlying zoning districts. So these don't supersede, so they still have the underlying zoning district, but you also have an overlay which encourages different things and allows more flexibility. And then at the end of that chapter is the flexible development tools, which talks on page 118, which talks about major roadway density bonuses. So that's when things are located along a major roadway. Higher densities are encouraged. Affordable housing density bonus, it talks about the zones that's allowed in as well. Infill development in residential and development standards modification option. And so in each of those, they have images to give you examples of where those would be applied and encourage that. And so in that infill development in residential districts, then we talk about the density bonus infill. And so that you can see here, it might be on page 120. Let me see if I have it in here. Yep. So you can see that where these tools are allowed to occur. So with the development, it talks about perimeter streetscape and treatment, architectural design, land use, and open space recreation. So it's not like a huge density bonus. In order for them to get where they want, they have to provide quite a bit of quality, quite a bit of thoughtful design. And I mean, even sometimes just half a unit of 0.5 for dwelling units per acre to 1, sometimes can be a huge difference to a project, especially in the downtown. So here you can see that it is, so for detached residential development, they can earn a density of 0.15 dwelling units per acre for each 10 points they provide, up to the district detailed in the residential table. So here, let me show you, I'll go back to that. Let me just see, I'll go back. So it's not a free-for-all, so you know. Okay, so at the top of that page, which is beyond like 73 or 76, it has maximum residential density units per acre. So for R1, it has 1.8. But then the line below, it says maximum residential density with your flexible development tools is only 2.5. So you're not going to have a multifamily in a rural residential district. It's going to be 2.5 at the most if they meet those categories. They may not get up to 2.5 with those opportunities. Same with R2, it goes from 3.6 to 6, and so on. So the biggest one would be multifamily is 36 maximum, and it can go up to 50. And 50 seems high, but it's really actually not. There's been some creative things going on. We're actually doing one in, I'm not, but it's going on in Mesa, and it sounds scary, but it's 160 units per acre, which is kind of crazy because it's not in a downtown like high-rise area, but it's just the creativity for affordable housing and the size, and they're compacting them together and the way they stack them, and it gets really dense, but it's actually really nice and it doesn't feel like it. So this is just giving you some options to get to that point, but that would be, I don't even know if we offer enough points to get from 36 to 50, but you can always add more point options depending on what you've seen at conferences and where, CNU or anything like that, you can always add options to this ordinance of, we've seen this would be a great option and tool, or it's something that a developer or somebody has come and said, hey, I can do this, it wasn't thought of, and you can say, yeah, let's add that, that would qualify. So we can probably add, actually, I'll think about that right now, give myself an idea. There should be one that, director approved points for exemplary design standards. Okay, so now going back. So that's what all those different things are. So you have like increased common landscape setback with 20 feet, 15 to 15 feet, irrigation in front yards, additional trees, partial treatment of paving surfaces for driveways, comprehensive streetscape plan, development agreements, all kinds of different things. In architecture, we talk about house plans which demonstrate enhanced level architecture, premium grade exterior materials. For land use, there's options with create a project encompassing commercial and residential within the same building of a downtown area. Use existing building in the downtown area. Create affordable housing, put it and enforced by CCNRs within 20% of the project. Create community gathering spaces that is open to the public. So different things that they can put into their project to get their density higher without them having to come through and plead to you guys, please let me do an extra couple of units. So that is the development standards options for flexibility. I know I just ran through that important section pretty quickly. Do you guys have questions or comments yet? Okay.
Anybody in the audience have any questions? You're the experts. Okay, Mr. Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, when you talk about affordable housing, are you talking about home ownership housing or rental housing or both?
It would be both. We don't describe it. So it's not HUD. So it would be affordable. I know they just described a definition about whatever the percentage is based on the city. So it could be either or. So you could block, a lot of people have said like the first floor or 20% of the apartments are designated for this the rental costs, or it could be that you take 20 to 30% of your homes and designate them at whatever the 80% of AMI or whatever, is in there. So it just depends however the development agreement works or they want to do it. But I know we had some sessions, we were just talking about it for some of the conferences, and it's hard because sometimes you have these developers that come in, and so they have projects where they have to make money, and they have projects that they can offset from the other project. They can provide those incentives for affordable housing, for the lower spectrum.
And this would be for both new development and refurbishing old buildings, because our problem here in Nogales is we're landlocked.
Yes.
And there's not enough land for new development. So we have to think about renewing the old inventory of housing that we have available. So that was my question. I thought you were talking about new development on home ownership.
Yeah, we definitely mentioned, specifically put in here that we provided the greatest density bonuses allowed was 50, and that was specifically for utilizing an existing building. If you're utilizing existing and renovating it, those are the most obviously difficult, but the most rewarding because they're already on infrastructure, they've already got this, but then you have to update them with today's codes. So that was provided the most points so that you could get the density you need while lowering, getting more units in there if possible. Yeah, existing buildings, affordable housing enforced by, and we can also add rental or for purchase. But yeah, I was trying really hard not to just say it was, because I don't feel that housing matters if it's for rent or for purchase. in zoning, it's based on what you build, how it looks. So if you see single-family home, but it's being rented out, it doesn't matter because it looks like a single-family home. Same with apartments in attached townhomes. They could be for rent or for sale. It doesn't matter if you're renting it or owning it. You shouldn't be, it should just be able, what it looks like. Do you like the way it looks? Does it fit with the community character? It should be fine. It doesn't matter how many families or how they're being able to live there. It shouldn't matter. So then we go into the non-conforming uses section. Legal non-conforming uses, non-conforming lots and structures. We talk about, just put some stuff in there about any uses that were previously approved and allowed. Just the basic standards of reconstruction, a lot of record substitute uses, things like that. Building permits, when a footprint has been in place. Excuse me. And then we go into parking requirements. So parking was a big issue. So we added a table here. We talk about the activity types based on what it is. So you have, if it's agricultural use, you have the specific use, how many vehicle spaces and how many bicycle parking spaces are required. Bike spaces were not really previously in there so much, but it's been a topic a lot lately for people who are, not able to have a car. They want to be able to provide spaces at the facility, at their apartment, at their workplace of work, things like that. So I didn't want to put too many in here, so I tried to keep it a little on the lower side. If you guys wanted to bump it up, you could, obviously. But just keeping in mind who might use the spaces. So we talked about, studio bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, how many spaces. And then we obviously put in a comment about there for plus 0.25 units per unit for guest parking. It's become a big issue in other jurisdictions. The guest parking is not accounting for it. And then they go into street parking in front of other people's houses and they restrict access to commercial or other people's spaces. And so they want to make sure that there's that accounted for. So if you were to have 4 units, you would provide 1 extra guest spot. And then it goes into more detail about the different types of uses, government facilities, medical. I know the developers had looked at these a lot, and so I'm probably going to get more comments about if they feel some spaces are too much or too little. But those were based on a little bit of the industry standards, and then I made them a little less restrictive on top of that. I wanted to encourage, not discourage development. So parking is, they always say sometimes parking is a required evil sometimes, and it doesn't always, you don't get your money back on it. It's just a space. And so I wanted to make sure that we're not taking up space that could be used for landscaping or parking when it could be used for those other uses. When we have bike parking available, or if it's located on a arterial, which is why we have the density along major collectors. And so we go in through there and we talk also just light industrial uses, warehousing, et cetera. And then we also just clarified and looked at, there is sections on parking reductions. So clarified where those were, put them in the same section. So it wasn't in all these different sections. You weren't searching for it. So that's there. We also discussed shared parking facilities as well. So if you have 2 uses that might use a space, or if they're off hours, one's the church in the morning and then they next to a park or an amphitheater in the evening, they don't need to both have this giant parking space. So it talks about how you could do that and what it would be considered shared, how close they have to be from each use, the lighting, the pedestrian pathways, so that it is considered a shared parking, and no one's saying that a parking lot a mile away is my shared parking, because that's not true. And then it goes into off-site parking allowances, all their kind of reductions, parking requirements, styles, the angles. This is more of the engineering, circulation and traffic. Talk about parking stall dimensions and vertical clearances, lighting, surfacing requirements, et cetera. And then we talk about a little bit of bicycle stuff in here. So bike storage, canopies. And then we talk about vehicle stacking. This was not previously in there for things like drive-throughs. It's starting to become more of a, hindrance on things. Everybody's like, oh, the coffee or the drive-throughs, sometimes, they're getting into 2-3 lanes of drive-through stacking. So saying how much, like a bank teller lane, how many stacking you would need before the actual facility is three car lengths. Restaurant drive-through is minimum of 5 cars should be able to stack without impeding traffic. Things like that. I mean, that's not even that long, that many. I mean, some places you go, they're popular. I mean, they shut down entire intersections. In the city I live, they've actually required some of the restaurants to move locations because they were really bad. So they actually shut them down and moved them. So
One quick
Yes.
question. And, you know, you're Hector. These requirements fulfill right now what we have, you know, let's say our Walgreens store or our McDonald's right now that we have. Do they fit the criteria right now?
I'm not sure if they do. If they don't, they would be grandfathered. And it states in the beginning of the administration section that anything that was developed or in permit, I know we had questions about that. So anything that's already in the process of being permitted or has been submitted would be okay with the old code. They would not have to follow this code at that time because they're already in the process or approved or, occupancy.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to scare away
No. Yeah, everything that's,
anybody.
so yeah, let me be clear. So anything that's existing has been submitted. So if anybody submits a rezone or submits a site plan or a building permit before you guys adopt the code, even though their permit may not be approved till after the adoption, they're still fine. They'd be grandfathered, they're good to go. If they want to do any updates, they would then have to look at how to do those things, and then they work with staff on figuring out a way to make it get as close as possible to the current code if they can't do it. So,
Also, Mayor, the intent is to make it more flexible as well. It may be also meeting the requirement right now, but the intent
Yeah,
is to
they
make
might
it
be.
more flexible.
Thank you.
yeah, they may be meeting it. We just, it hasn't been a review requirement in the past, where now it would be. And then we talk about off-street loading requirements, about how if it's this building square footage, like where you're gonna, how much truck docking spaces you're gonna need for those industrial and commercial uses. And those were all, I also made very lenient, just to get you guys started with something and see how it affects, so that you can always make it more restricted in the future. The next big one is signage. We added quite a bit here, and put more examples and pictures, especially with signs. Pictures mean a lot to understand what things are. So we went into that and went to different design guidelines, design types, define it's all these signs in here. Provide examples of how you would measure height of a sign. Let's see, I don't think it goes into it, no. And it talks about how you determine what the text is, if it's a circular sign, a 3D sign, like what gets counted. So we put all that stuff in there. The differences between banner signs and A-frame signs, because signage is always the biggest issue, especially with commercial and commercial and industrial. Signage is everything. If you don't have signage, you don't have, people pay more for you have arterial frontage to have your sign there. If you're in the back, you kind of get screwed a little bit, but it's also why you paid that cheaper rental cost. And so we wanted to make sure that the signage in here was comprehensive. Talked about temporary and portable signage requirements, master sign program options for people who want to deviate. So there should be another option if you're in this bigger complex and you've got some tenants in the back. I do this a lot in Casa Grande. We'll do a master sign program so that you can have more signage on the front to cover some of the guys that are in the way back. And so it allows you to deviate from some things as long as you have a plan, and then it's all cohesive and the style looks the same and it looks all nice and the pedestals look good, the lighting's good. Talked about maintenance, making sure everything looks good, it's not broken, it's not the paint's not bleeding or whatnot. Put calculations in there, et cetera. And so this one was pretty comprehensive. So I was on the Planning Commission in Gilbert when they went through their lovely Supreme Court case. So I had a lot of information. I made sure it was all in your code so that you're all good. So you should be covered. I made sure everything is, especially with political signs and temporary signs and the time and how the legibility and reading signs, tried to remove a lot of that requirement from there. So you should have a lot of options for anybody that wants to come in and do signage for any kind of business. We even talked about, home occupation signs, realtor signs, all that kind of stuff. Making sure they're not hazards. We put in there legally non-conforming signs, so any signs that are existing as well. There's a lot of cool signs in older communities. You get neons and all kinds of marquees, and so you want to be able to have the flexibility to keep those and improve those as well. Yes.
The billboards, they're not part of the zoning.
I was
right?
told to
Because-
leave those out, to make them prohibit billboards. That was my direction, if you want to keep billboards prohibited, or I can, if it's kind of up to you, or we can make, I believe that's what we went with, was that billboards are a prohibited sign.
Okay,
The existing code prohibits, yeah.
So we were just keeping with that, but I can always add items or requirements for those if you wanted.
Going back to the question, is that the same code for the state routes also?
For the safe routes?
Yes, like Grand Avenue is a state route. Does that apply to, that code applies to that signage code?
Well, the safe routes, isn't that governed by ADOT a little bit? So they have their own requirements which would supersede these. So as far as separation off, so you would have to follow those, and then if you can try to get in there. But yeah, I think there's a separate, what is it, I think 500 feet or so far off the route, you have to be the right of way. So that would go first, whatever the requirements are there.
it's what we have in place here.
Well, you can,
Because
I mean, you can have billboards if you want. There's ways, I mean, because there's not everything is the route, but you can have them in different areas. I've seen them in different areas, like in smaller local commercial areas.
I think it's more of a legal question, because I know the billboards are kind of special in the sense that they don't pertain to some of these codes. I know people can purchase billboards even before the 45 days of political billboards.
Are you talking about political or?
Yeah,
Or the big,
big billboards, yeah.
Well, billboards, you can ban billboards because just because they're along ADOT right of way, the land on which the billboard sits is going to be in the city, unless, with the exception, sometimes ADOT will actually have little gaps and gores of property that they will lease out to a billboard company, and that would probably be exempt from the city's ban. But as far as we can't regulate the content of billboards. So if you're talking about the comparison between the Title 16 rules for allowing political signs, only I think it's 71 days prior to the election, or maybe it's 91 now. That's completely different than what could be put on a billboard, because those are temporary signs planted, on presumably private property. So whereas a billboard is a permanent structure sign, so you could run political messages on billboards 365 days a year.
Yeah, okay, thank
Does
you.
that answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
yeah. And if you wanted to think about it, I know a couple jurisdictions I work in and some clients I work when they put billboards on there, and the jurisdictions have restricted billboards in different ways. For instance, if it's within 500 feet of a residential community, you're just not allowed to have any night lighting. Lighting has to be off by 10, or it has to be only, they're restricted in size. Whereas if they're in a commercial industrial area, they can be LED, they can be 365, they can be moving, all kinds of different things. And they can go to the maximum billboard size and height. But other jurisdictions I've seen have allowed them with restrictions if you want. And then other jurisdictions have completely prohibited them. It's just up to you guys what you want to do.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Is it fair to say that this is a living, breathing document that can be amended as we go into the future? And that for the purpose of this study session, it's important to note that what this is it's a design format for our code that can eventually be amended years into the future. And what's being proposed here is that this offers a very easy way to do that. Whereas in the past, it was muddled. You wouldn't know where to even start to put these questions in it. And here you have a design element that if you bring up these topics, it's easy to know where you're gonna do it. And then it has to be an executive session that decides that. And then this is all digitized so that it's easily implemented. I'm just trying to add a little clarification. Am I correct?
Yes, and we'll get into that chapter 2, but that is absolutely correct. So this, just like a comp plan, our general plan, the zoning code and development code are amendable. And we did add a section on amendments to the code because it wasn't previously in there, describing how you do those amendments, if they're major or they're minor. And it can happen. I was mentioning to Hector, I work on some code amendments for Yavapai County. And just like this, they've updated it so that they're going to go through another update. But it's very easy to go in there, and even if they want to change one sentence or the interpretation of something is not very clear because they've been having some legal issues, they can go in there and clarify it very easily. And it doesn't take a huge ordinance update. It's simply a request by council, and then staff does it, and they come back a month or two later with a code update, and it's done. And that can be done in any section, as big amendment you want or as small as amendment you want. It does not have to be this entire document, because the entire document is a very, it's huge, and it encompasses so much. Whereas someone might not be as concerned about a section in landscaping or a clarification in signage as they would about changing their actual zoning category and standards. So yes, that is exactly it. And it's good. Thank you for pointing that out. The next slide talks about that actually too. So, and then section 600 and 700, so supplemental regulations, that just has to do with different things that come up. So that was 167, I could read. Yeah, the signage section goes on for quite a while. But we talk about projections, temporary uses, closed projections in the supplemental. People are always asking questions about what's a bay window, how much eaves can I go over, those types of different things. Roof overhangs, swimming pools, that kind of stuff. And it was interesting because some of that use stuff was in the table of contents, but not actually in there. And then we clarified also the charitable box, drop box location stuff. People are always asking about, making code requirements for those. Landscaping standards, walls and screening, talks about what it shall be applied for, like street landscaping versus property landscaping, parking landscaping for screening from headlights, screening from, if you've got drive-throughs, how that bit gets screened. You don't want everything to just be a cinder block wall everywhere. So we talk about screening between different jurisdictions. If it's residential to residential, you can see here, it's fine, office to office, fine. But if it's office and residential or office and commercial, there should be some type of screening between them so that they don't just blend into each other. And then you have a detailed parking landscape area too. We just went into a little more detail there about what's expected, the type of trees, the amount of soil, so that you don't just get those diamonds and the trees just die every time. I mean, it kind of takes up a parking space and it's not useful to have a dead dirt thing. So expanded on how, if you're gonna put one in, you're gonna put one in, and it should be big enough to be sustainable and to have a tree grow there without it falling over and things like that. And then, here's more details on that kind of stuff. So we talk about the screen against jurisdictions. Multifamily should have walls versus landscape screening. So that was put in there. And then, and we added, and we doubled up also on the site visibility triangles, because I didn't see that in the code. It was very hard to understand what they were meaning. So revised that to what those would look like. So instead of, I can't even remember the equation that they put in there. It was really hard to understand. Instead of just 30 by 30 triangle, that's your site visibility triangle. It's just basic things, but it got a little too, someone liked writing a lot, and it just got really tiresome to read, and you kind of lost the interpretation and what you're trying to do halfway through it. So cleared that up as well. We just left in the exhibits from before that were previously drawn. until, those can always be amended as you guys go through it. Juan or whoever, Hector, or whoever wants to amend, there's finding things that they want to change, then they can always change out those exhibits, those images very easily. All right, outdoor lighting and ordinance implementation. And so then for the outdoor lighting portion, we talk about, which is on page 189, we talk about street lighting standards, flood, what's it called? Like illumination, so like where the lighting goes on, trespasses onto other people's property, what is allowed, cutoffs and things like that, shielding, filtration. The lighting standards in here, I know we put a table in here. Previously, there was something else, it was like another weird thing with hatch marks and things. I couldn't really understand it. So currently, this is what's in your existing code. I would expect this table on page 190 to eventually be updated, because lighting and the way lighting is done is so different now. They're constantly changing lumens versus foot candles versus wattage. They don't even use watts anymore, really. And then how you would shield it. So there's lots of different things. I know a lot of jurisdictions go to LED, but then sometimes the LED color is too bright if it needs to be a different LED color. And so there's lots of different things as you go through and figure out what you guys prefer and the residents like, then you can fully amend this table to meet your standards. But it's in there now based on what your current standards are. And then the ordinance implementation on 192, this is where we added quite a bit because there was no clear direction on a couple things. It was just that you shall go through the rezoning process, you shall go through a variance amendment, but they didn't tell you what the requirements were or how it gets evaluated. And so we zoning compliance certificates were in there as well as all those other things, but then we went to zoning code amendments, which was not previously in there. And it talked about code amendment pre-application. We had a pre-application process, what the zoning code amendment should be submitted or required to have. And talked about how it gets reviewed. The planning commission, the city council, or a property owner can request these amendments, and how it goes through, how it will be beneficial, like what it is. Because previously it was just, it was technically nothing in there for you to make an amendment. So now that's in there. And we went into a little bit more about the rezonings, how you initiate it, what an application looks like, the pre-application process again. And then we talk about the special yes.
Lighting. 1.8, 1.801.
190,
Is that in there, or are we?
It's been there. It just didn't look like that because it was in a typewriter format, but it's been there. So we reformatted that so you could read it, but and then we just added some more details about full cutoff.
We do have events that go beyond that. So what's gonna be the case on specifics like that?
So that's for recreational facilities, not, so events.
That's where I'm talking, maybe our 4th of July. By the time we finish our cleanup and stuff like that, it's over midnight. We have baseball tournaments and stuff like that where we might get rain and let's say Little League lets us stay till 1 a.m.
Okay. Hector, do you currently have like a special event permit?
Yes.
You do? So can I tie it, because something like that would go in that, right? So I could tie it into that, probably? So those are on a case-by-case basis versus like a ballpark will have its lights on all the time?
Yeah.
So it's a special event, okay, I'll look at revising that and adding some more detail then with special event permit? Okay,
Isn't it already there? It says except to conclude a specific recreational or sporting event that started before 11, so I think that covers that.
The bottom.
I would agree with that. I think you cover it fine.
okay,
I think this is what intended so that people can't go to the tennis courts or pickleball courts at night, turn on the lights at midnight and start playing
Yeah.
sort of thing. But I think you're covered in there. I also think that if there is a special event permit that's going to have, lighting, recreational or sports lighting on, you could specifically note that in the event permit that the lighting can go on till midnight or 1 o'clock or whatever they anticipate, just so it's real clear.
Okay, but I think I might want to add something just about special event permits anyway in the implementation, just to clarify something. Okay. And then in the variance and use permits, I added the 4 required conditions according to state statute. So previously it just said you applied for a variance and someone reviewed it. So now it's documented, which it was already there, but this is formalizing it in your code, the 4 conditions that have to be met for variances, and also the findings for use permits. So those are in there so that people are aware of what they're going to be looking for. And in case anybody wants to amend any application documents for the city, then they can also just reference those or copy from it, because those are directly from the ARS. So that is the zoning code section article. Are there any, before we move on to the more fun, technical, exciting engineering section? That was the fun section, so be prepared. Okay, yes. So then we, in the table of contents, you'll saw there was a bunch of different sections that were like in reference of in this. So Article 2 is MAG standards in reference. And then it goes into Article 3, which is the Development Standards Code. So we talked about the title, purpose, definitions, and admin and enforcement, very similar between the zoning code. But we deleted, well, I would say deleted, we removed and vice versa the definitions between zoning and engineering. So things that were more engineering related went from zoning to engineering. Things that were more zoning went into zoning. And then if there were duplicates, we worked with staff to decide which is the definition they preferred that would apply to both and delete it. So there wasn't like, oh, in this code it means this, but in this code it means that. They should be, but between the 2 codes, they should be the same. In this instance anyway. So we have the clear division between zoning code and development standards code. The definitions I mentioned don't duplicate. We added some more images, and then we maintained building permits and where is not required, occupancy permits, and the things about the development review committee. So not a lot of changes. I mean, just basic changes there for clarification and cleaning up. And then we go to the general regulations. Detailed a lot of common projects and their requirements that you would see: moving of buildings, disposal, height limitations, setback requirements for tall buildings. Again, talked about site visibility triangles and made sure this matched what was in the zoning code. Added swimming pools and separation of residential and commercial uses as they were actually listed in the code previously, but in the table of contents, but there was no section for them. So we added those back in. Here you can see the image of a site visibility triangle. And those are just areas that, because of, for visibility, you don't want anything higher than 3 feet in that triangle. So that has to do with walls, landscaping, decorations, buildings, things like that. And then we talked about, so let's see. And then you go into the site plan section. And you talked, and site plan, performance standards, public facilities, we maintained each section, and Juan and his team are actually going through and updating all of those. We've updated them quite a bit of the areas that needed to be clarified. What was it? We changed inspector to official or something like that, or vice, right? They were using old terminology, so we fixed those. And just we're also going in, and there were some discrepancies on public facilities and some of the performance standards regarding streetway, right-of-ways and things like that. So those are being cleaned up. There are more technical engineering. And then in recreational facilities and sites and floodplain, we reduced the park reservation of land that was mentioned in there. State law used to allow up to 50 acres of a built park to be adopted by the city in lieu of, or some kind of, I forget what it was. It happened, I want to say 10 or 15 years ago. But it changed from 50 to 30 acres. So there was no incentive for a developer to build 50 acres, but there's incentive for them to build 30. So we just clarified that number so that was up with the new code. And then Oh, I spelled it wrong. Floodplain references Santa Cruz County. I need to change that. But yeah, so the references are all to the county on that. Grading and drainage and access standards, again, we maintain each section, and Juan and his team were working on those. We had just mentioned that now it's in a format and a way that we can review it. And he intends that as they go through it, this will probably be a section that they amend in the future to add more detail, cross sections for each of the areas. It's defined in there, but they're going to go through and make sure, and we'll see how far we can get along in the next couple of weeks. But they're referencing the other requirements of the state. And so making sure that everything matches up. But that would be a section where they want to put more detail in later on. And then the subdivision platting procedures. We took added some information on page 108 on platting, pre-application meeting requirements, remove physical copies. A lot of the codes, still have the old stuff. Must submit 20 copies on this and 5 copies of this, and it's all digital or something now. So remove those requirements. And then remove the tentative plat hearing requirement. It's not required by the state. So you can, tentative plats are not, but final plats are. So that is going to still go to council, but the tentative plat is just the beginning process and beginning review. So that is not a requirement to come through the hearing process. And then the fee schedule, we added by reference to allow flexibility to be updated per annual reviews and updates. A lot of jurisdictions, obviously, as things change, they do an annual review or every few years a review of how long it takes for projects to be reviewed. And by state law, you're allowed to implement fees based on those timeframes and the cost of your staff work. So we added those as a reference only, so those can be updated anytime. And then addressing the same thing by reference only, referencing that ordinance. Violations and penalties, maintain that section as it currently exists. And then the appendix, again, is a reference. I believe that's also for fee schedule if it wants to be added. So different fee options, but remove the actual fees so that they'll be under a separate document. And that is the entire super fun engineering section. It's not as exciting. I know Juan and his team are so thrilled about it. They geek out over it, but I don't if there's any, so a lot of the comments would be for him or his team. And I do believe we're going to try to update this as much as possible. We've had quite a few comments on this. And I know we can discuss them, but there were some comments about adding some things that they didn't agree with.
Does this go to, do we have to post this to general public and so many days and then we, whatever
Yes,
comments or?
it was already
look into
posted.
it? Okay.
It was posted for the 60-day review, so it did go through that process already. And it was sent out to the adjacent areas. And we had some comments, not really many. But it will also, for the hearing process, be required to go to public hearing and be posted. And then I believe it needs to be also available in paper and online. It's available as well, I believe. So. Yes, and it will go to Planning Commission as well. So it'll go to Planning Commission first for that public hearing, be notified in that, and then also go to council.
Okay.
And is there, I believe, a 30-day referendum period for this? I think.
Done.
Is there a 30-day referendum on this one as well?
Yeah,
Yes.
there would be, but it would have to be on the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you would probably adopt this by one ordinance and this by another ordinance, but you would have to refer the whole thing. And just as a practical matter, when you're going and collecting signatures, you have to include this with you. So it probably becomes somewhat of a burden. But I was going to ask a couple questions though.
Yes.
Did you include the two new zoning statutes in this? The one about timeframes, the time shot clock, and the backyard foul in the shot clock would probably be in the development code, and then the backyard foul would be in the residential use. Did you include reference to that?
I did not include the backyard foul. That probably needs to go into the other section.
Just for reference, it's
Yeah.
9-46211 is the shot clock for returning zoning. This is really actually for zoning applications, and
I was wondering how you wanted to address that because that, I haven't seen those been brought into the code. It's more of a policy and then they usually do a
Well, there's,
waiver.
yeah, I think, well, we're recommending, there's the League of Cities has put out sort of model code language. I can send that down.
Okay.
I would include it in the code just so it's handy in one place rather than have to refer back to the statute. And the other one's 9-46212, which is the backyard fowl, chickens, no roosters.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely put those in there. Yeah, if you can send me that league one for sure, because that one I was like that, it gets really touchy, and you know with the time shot clock on stuff like that, and what you can be required to. And I found most jurisdictions end up getting just a waiver because they get constricted and have issues with it. I've actually had issues in another jurisdiction recently. Well, actually two of them, where they were trying to come on the shot clock, and so they just kind of pushed it through at the last minute, and it wasn't ready, and it kind of screwed things up. So.
Question, can you put that in layman's terms, please?
Oh, the shot clock?
Yeah.
So here, the attorney can do that one.
The new state statute that was passed last year, of the last legislative session, that basically says for a zoning application, there has to be a determination within 30 days of receipt whether or not the application's complete or not. So typically, just as a practice, it's not going to be complete. There's always going to be a return for most rezoning applications. It's going to get returned for additional information. So, and then it just keeps going.
Does it keep resetting?
Yeah.
Because
Well, I take that back. It actually, if it's once it's resubmitted, it's 15 days each. So that one, and then once it's determined to be complete at the staff level, the city then has basically 6 months to approve or deny. Now, on a complex project, the developer may want more time to go through the process because they have to go through, community notice meetings and all that, planning and zoning, and city council. And if it's starting to go south for them, they may want more time, so they can waive it, those 180 days if they need it.
are they considering, is this similar to the substantive and administrative and substantive review they did a couple of years ago? Is it, because I know, I forget, at least 5, maybe more years ago, there was you submitted for the administrative review, which was the first. And then you moved on to substantive review. Is it kind of the same thing? So the administrative was, again, if your application is complete.
Yeah.
And then once you passed that, then you went to the substantive review, which was actual formal comments. Kind of sounds a lot the same, but at that time, a lot of jurisdictions did a waiver. When you did your first submittal, you had a waiver that you signed that said, I agree to more than the time given, blah, 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 blah. So you waived your right to the
This just says, shall adopt an amendment to the municipality's zoning ordinance, which would include either a text amendment or a rezoning that requires the municipality to determine whether a zoning application is administratively complete within 30 days. So my read of that is staff level approval. So, this legislation came out of a couple of really bad examples that took a long, long time to go through the rezoning process. But typically 6 months from start to finish isn't unusual. I mean, I think you can get it done for the most part. And then there are a couple options of ways to extend it for 30 days.
And it's not a cumulative, 6 months. It's like, okay, as I understood it, is you submit, the staff makes their first review comments, takes 4 weeks, and then it stops. And then when it goes back to the developer or applicant, it's not on the shot
The
clock.
180 days starts once it's complete. So once it's ready for basically P&Z review, your clock starts.
Yeah, because I have clients sometimes that'll take 3 months to get reviews back to me so I can get it to the city. And you don't want that ruining your timeline.
Right. It's once you get it back. In other words, the application comes in and it's returned with comments. You have to do that within 30 days. Once it comes back, then the staff has 15 days to review it, to either send it back for more changes or send it forward to the public hearing process.
Was there another comment I saw? No, okay.
Anybody have any other comments? Council? Anybody from the,
We've been going through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hector? Any comments?
The only comment is about the dates.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we're going to continue receiving comments through September, maybe a little bit after that too, and update the code per more comments. We're looking at planning commission hearing dates, and then we're looking at city council public hearing dates as well.
Okay, so with us, it'd be with city council in October?
No, yeah, probably not in October because we need to go to planning commission potentially October 17. Jessica, October 17, but we're looking into the planning commission members right now to October 17. And then maybe the first meeting of November, Mayor, potentially. The first Wednesday,
The 6th,
November 6th.
yes.
Okay.
So this would have to be in our November meeting for the final hearing and ordinance adoption, right?
Well, that will be a public hearing, yes, on November 6th. And we have to advertise this in a newspaper 15 days before the planning commission meeting and also the city council. That becomes the legal advertisement.
Okay. Anything else that the council needs to help you in, or I think you guys have
No, just if you have any more.
you guys have had a good opportunity to work with landlords and everybody, stakeholders on this, and thank you guys for participating in all this, because that's you guys are the ones that use it, and we want to make it sure that we're all on the same page and everybody works together. Now, one question, Hector, with this, all these changes and adaptations that we're looking at, are we coinciding with what the state, not the state, our county is doing? Where our changes collaborate with theirs, where it's like we talked, Hector, one-stop shop. So we'll be more in conjunction to what they're doing also.
Not yet, Mayor, perhaps that's something that we talk about it. It's something will be good to do because a lot of developers, architects, they work with the county and also with us. So we can coordinate our requirements instead of finding discrepancies because we have to work with the county, especially with the floodplain use permits. And that would be a very good idea to be able to coordinate more often.
Have you had this experience with other cities and counties, Jessica, where you coordinate?
No, actually, so here we've updated a lot of the code portions like floodplain, and there was some other sections that now the county has taken over. So we referenced that all goes, we referenced in the code that the county is the coordinator on that. Most jurisdictions I work with, they have, the county does their little thing, and then they're like, no, you're separate from us. We do what we want. And then also then the cities try to influence the county the other way. So it's a more of a discrepancy between the two, but you guys seem to be working pretty well together. So you guys will have the county has their requirements, and they'll work with them on certain permitting and standards, as well as ADOT, but whatever you have will usually be more restrictive or more requirements than the county anyway, so.
Except on the flooding. right?
Right, that's specifically mentioned in here. We actually reference I forget where it is, but we actually took the memo or something we put in, and we put it in there, the floodplain memo, yeah.
Okay,
So we copied the whole document and just dropped it right in there.
okay. Any other comments, guys? Go ahead, Ms. Montiel.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Hector. This is a huge undertaking. I really appreciate it. You had the vision to look into this and actually stepped up and did something about it. And I want to thank all three of you, four of you, or all of you that are here, and 6, 7 of you that are on this committee. I know you have a lot to do and you're very busy. Noel's always busy. And but thank you for taking the time for doing all that you have done. And I know the other half is coming up, but it's really nice that to see it's innovative and it's going to help the citizens of Nogales and also people that want to come invest in Nogales. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd like to mention that
Go ahead, sir.
Jessica brings a wealth of knowledge and experience from other communities, and so we're benefiting from all that experience that she's gone through this already, and it was very evident in the working sessions. They flow very easily because of her knowledge, so thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jessica. What else, Heck? That's it? Jessica, again, thank you for supporting us in all your knowledge and coming to help the city basically retransform 80 years or 100 years. But I think this is going to be very, very helpful for our community with our stakeholders being able to do their future investments and projects in an easier way to get their permits and everything. Yeah. Any other comment that you want to throw out to us? No?
Excited to see what you guys look like in 2 years or something. Like it's going to change.
Great.
We need it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So I guess we move to go into executive session, which is item number 4, executive session NRS, personal matters and legal advice, discussion and direction regarding city manager recruitment. Second, all in favor? Aye. So we move to executive session. Thank you. Reconvene from executive session, thank you. Move to item number 5, move to adjourn this meeting. Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.